Hello, everybody, and welcome. We are so happy to have you here. My name is Teacher Sasha, and I'm going to be our presenter for the evening. But you may have already seen here in the chat that I am not alone. We have two incredible teachers who are just off camera who are here to answer any and all questions that you have. So I'm going to call out their names, and then I want to kind of give us a lay of the land for this space and how we'll utilize our time for this evening. So our two off-camera teachers are Teacher Benji and Teacher Chase. If you have questions, we've got 30 teachers in the room. We want you to ask those questions. And so here's what I'm going to have us do. The chat, as you can see our teachers right now messaging in the chat, is an awesome spot for a quick back and forth. So if I ask a question and you want to answer a quick answer to it, that's the place to go. But if you have individual questions, and I really, really hope that you do, I want you to ask those into the Q&A. So you'll see that at the bottom of your Zoom webinar. If you don't see it, sometimes you have to click on the little three buttons that say more, and then you'll be able to see the Q&A option. And I want you to put your questions there because sometimes the chat, it can just kind of scroll on by and we would hate to miss any questions that you may have. So the Q&A is open and our teachers are ready for any questions you have. And don't worry, even if it's something that we started to cover at the beginning of the hour and you're like 30 minutes later, you're like, you know what, I actually have a follow-up question. You know what, maybe there's something I didn't ask I should have. There's no expiration for when you can ask certain questions within this hour, even if it was something that was like 20 slides ago, team. Okay, so let's go ahead and hop into our session for this evening. Now, we've got quite a few things that we want to cover. I kind of want to give an explanation here of your ninth grade year, 10th grade year, 11th grade year, senior year. What does it look like when it comes to test scores and the PSAT and SAT journey? Then it's going to be about understanding your PSAT score report and then trying to figure out, hey, is it ACT or is it SAT for me? And I know that we are here to talk about PSAT scores, but it's the PSAT, it's not the SAT. So you still have time and a decision to make to see which one is actually better for you. So we'll talk about those options. And then we're going to talk about coming up with a test prep plan and taking the official tests. And also the all-important thing of applying to colleges. We are here to go through and get a better score, not just so we have the score that we can just say we have the score. We are going to utilize it to get in and for us to get some scholarship dollars along the way. So team, let's go ahead and hop right in. Again, my name is Teacher Sasha, and I'm happy to kind of answer some questions along with our off-camera team. Okay, let's kind of first start out here by coming to a common understanding of our high school journey. Let's talk about 10th grade. Actually, for the students who are in the room, can you tell us in the chat, what grade are you currently in? So not in the Q&A for this question, but in the chat, what grade are you currently in? Are you in 10th grade, 11th grade, 9th grade? There we go. Okay, I see one 11th grade. And if you can't see, it just means that they have hosts and panelists. So that's just me being able to see. I'm not making this up. Okay, we have 11th grader. We have a 10th grader. If you want everybody to see your messages, just change the 2 in the chat to everyone. Okay, good. So that's kind of what I thought. A mix here of 10th and 11th graders. Okay, so when you were in the 10th grade, you're going to be taking something called the PSAT 10. You can also take the PSAT NMSQT. It just doesn't count for all the scholarships and good stuff that it can when you're 11th grader, but either of those exams that you are taking. It's also a wonderful time if you're a 10th grader to do some exploration to figure out, is the ACT or the SAT right for me? Now, as you head into your junior year, that's when you're going to start prepping for the PSAT NMSQT, and then you're going to be taking that in October. That's also when you're going to be determining if it's going to be the ACT or the SAT or both that you want to take and prepping for it and taking it. All happens in 11th grade. Now, you can most certainly in your senior year take the ACT or the SAT again. Many students choose this option, and I'm not going to knock that option. The only thing I want to say is that when you are a senior, when you're applying to colleges, you want to be able to choose early action options, early decision options, and because of that, you want to have a test score ready to go. Because not only is that going to be helpful for you to be able to get that in, a lot of schools have material deadlines of November 1st, so you don't want to be taking this test and waiting to see, you don't get your score back in time, and then, you don't have to, then you're not submitting an application that makes you kind of proud and represents all the hard work that you've done. But also because that can be a really good deterrent for you and if you're going to send your score or not. If you take it early enough, then you can start to compare it to the median scores of the previous incoming freshman classes at these colleges to figure out, Am I going to send my score? Am I not going to send my score? We'll talk a little bit about that kind of test strategy when it comes to college applications here in just a little bit. But just want you to know 11th grade is definitely the ideal, if not the summer before 12th grade. When you start doing it in 12th grade, it starts to get a little bit hairy just when you get your scores back and what delay that can put on your college applications. But you will be applying to college in right away, starting in your 12th grade year, applying for scholarships, and then accepting admission to whatever colleges you want to go to. That will happen in April. Okay, so now let's go ahead here and let's make sure that we understand the PSAT score report. Now, let's talk about the purpose of the PSAT, because it is not the full-blown SAT, but again, there's PSAT 9, PSAT 10, PSAT, and NMSQT. They are all excellent practice for the SAT. It is incredibly similar, and so it is wonderful practice. Also, if you take this test when you're a junior, the PSAT, NMSQT, that can get you, that's for the National Merit, the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. But what I want to say here is I know everybody associates your junior year in October with the National Merit, but there's actually only 20 different scholarship organizations that also will award you scholarships from that exam that are actually quote unquote easier to get than National Merit. And so the amount of times I see students say, well, I don't think I qualify for National Merit, so I'm not going to take that exam. But I see many, many students who still take it and still get scholarship dollars, even if they didn't get National Merit. And so I highly recommend taking the PSAT and MSQT starting in your sophomore year. That way you see how you're doing, and then junior year is when it actually counts. So even if you did better in your, sophomore year than you did in your junior year, it's going to be the junior score that is used. It's also important to know here that this is not used for college admissions. There's no score send that you can do to send your score off to colleges for the PSAT. And so nobody will see that test other than the people who are going to give you those scholarship dollars. So it's kind of in a way, it's a bit of a low stakes test. There's nothing bad that can come from it. Only good can come from NMSQT. Okay, so here, let's talk about what you can see on your score report. You will see your total score, and you're also going to see two subsection scores, one for the combined reading and writing section, and the other one for math. You're also going to see a percentile rank. So I'll show you here in a little bit what a chart looks like and how to understand percentile ranks. Then both reading and writing and math have 4 different sub buckets, 4 different domains that you'll see how you performed on each of them. And so you'll see how did you do specifically with algebra, specifically with trig. And that's actually very, very helpful, because then what you can do, because it's the PSAT, is you can look at it and say, okay, I want to raise my math score. It doesn't mean I have to get better at all the math. Maybe I'm doing really, really well in algebra, and I'm looking a little bit boo-boo here with the advanced math questions. Good. That's going to let you hone in to know what is it that you need to spend more time reviewing and studying for before you take the SAT. So it's very helpful to see that performance breakdown by domain. Now, let's talk about the timeline for you getting your score back. Now, October 1st or October 31st, that's typically when students were taking this exam. And then it's like 3 different batches of receiving your score back, either October 23rd, November 6th, or November 13th. Those are kind of the most common dates that you will have your scores come in these particular waves. Now, the reason why it's not super fast, I mean, if you're taking the SAT, for instance, on a Saturday, you get your score back in a week or 2. But this takes a little bit longer, and the reason why is because in order to figure out national merit, that's a number that changes every single year, and it also is different for every single state. So there's a lot of just looking through the data and making sure that they're doing that comparison metrics before telling you who are the national merit finalists. Now, let's go ahead and kind of look at a score distribution here. So this is the PSAT NMSQT score range. So if you're familiar with the SAT, you'll know that a perfect score is 800, 800, which is 1600, but the PSAT is not out of 800 for each subsection, it is out of 760. So that's important to know here. So you can see the score distribution where the median score, the most kind of common that you'll see people have here, right in the middle, is a 980. And then the top that you can receive here, is a 1520. So just kind of gives you an idea. I hear people say all the time, like, what's a good score? What's the best score? What should I be shooting for? It's actually a very almost individualized type of question, because it depends on what type of college it is that you're looking at and where you want to go. But this just gives you a good sense here of what is the average in our country? How are they performing? Now, to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this, what's a good PSAT score, I would think of this. There's kind of like two different ways of thinking of this question. Here's the first. The first are these benchmarks. So you will see these benchmarks listed on your score report, and the benchmarks are different for ninth grade, 10th grade, or 11th grade. Even for the fall versus the spring, there are all these different benchmarks. Now, if you are at a school that takes the SAT during the school day, then you've likely probably heard these benchmarks. A lot of times schools have posters up in the hallways with these. But what these benchmark numbers mean is that, for instance, if I'm an 11th grader and I get a 510 on math, that means I met benchmark, which means that I have a 75% chance of achieving a C or better in my first year in college math. Now, that's important because that's showing colleges that you have a good score, yes, of course, but also that you are prepared to engage with rigorous college level courses. And so that's what they mean by benchmark. So I think that's could be one really practical way of seeing, is my score good or not, is by looking at this and saying, am I actually meeting the benchmark to show success in the future in college? Another way of thinking about this is going to be your percentile rank. So if you're unfamiliar with percentiles, don't worry, they're very easy to understand. The higher your percentile number, the better. So for instance, let's say I got my score back and I am in the 70th percentile, 70. What that means is that I scored better than 70% of people who took that exam when I took it. So percentile ranks and percentile scores are test specific. So if you took, for instance, just kind of referencing the Saturday, if you took an October 4th SAT on a Saturday, that is what you're being compared to, is everybody who took it on that same date. So the percentile scores change a little bit for every single test, depending on who all took the test in that administration. Now, again, if you're in the 70th percentile, that means you do better than 70% of people. You'll see that percentiles go all the way up to the 99th. You cannot have a 100th percentile, because that would mean that you did better than 100% of students who took it. That would mean that you did better than yourself. That's not possible. Even with a perfect score, that's not possible. The highest is 99th percentile. Now, the reason why this can be useful is that every single college is almost a little tricky because it's not standardized with how they decide to report out their scores at their school. So you may see that some schools are saying, hey, here's the median score for students who got in last year. Or hey, here's the average score. Or hey, most of our students score at the 90th percentile or above. So you want to be familiar with however it is that a college is telling you and reporting out their scores for you to do comparison. You want to make sure that you can understand it and you can figure out, what is that score? What is your goal? You want to have that goal ahead of time. Sometimes students will go ahead and take the SAT and then say, okay, well, based on that score, let me go ahead and see what colleges I can get into. It's much better to do it the other way and to say, here are the schools I know I want to go to. So that means I have this goal. I need to grow 250 points over this next year. That is incredibly doable to do. But I don't want you to do it the other way and just say, oh, I guess I'll just go to a school that kind of matches the score that I'm seeing here. Do it the other way, team, because you have time to prep. Now, when we're talking specifically here about national merit, because if you took the PSAT and MSQT, that's what you're here for. Just kind of giving you a cutoff and just a comparison point from a couple of years ago here. In 2023, the average approximately 1440. That was for the national merit cutoff. That's the average. Again, this varies a lot by states. There are some states like Massachusetts, for example, that has a much higher score, and there are other schools that have, or not schools, other states that have lower scores. So it is a comparison against all of the people who took in that state, and some states just have average that are higher for the PSAT. So here's kind of an example right here of the range that you could see of like anywhere between a 1390 to a 1490. That could all be that little range there for national merit. But as a reminder, even if you scored at that level as a sophomore, you can only qualify for any of the scholarships, not just national merit, but any of the other ones in your junior year in the fall. Okay, so let's kind of talk about the scoring differences. We kind of alluded to them here, but the PSAT has the lowest score of a 320. That even if you don't do any single question, you're going to get a 320, and the top you can do is a 1520, which is different from the SAT, which the lowest score you can get is a 400, and the highest is going to be a 1600. That's a perfect score. Now, let's go ahead and talk about which one is better, if it's the ACT or if it's the SAT. And I think this is a really important question because you may have had in your mind, like, I know everybody takes the ACT around me, so that's what I want to take, or, my school preps me for the SAT. So you really need to stop and actually think, like, which one is your skill set more going to allow you to do better on. Now, when we're talking about test scores and college admissions, it does not matter if we're talking about ACT or SAT. I promise you. I feel like I still hear people say, like, oh, the SAT is the one that colleges prefer, and some colleges don't take the ACT. That is absolutely false. They do not care if it's ACT or SAT. You just need to find the one that you do best in. Now, there are three different categories that colleges fall in when it comes to using test scores for college admissions. So let me just pause here for a moment, kind of give a little bit of some history. It is now 2025. But if you remember, in 2020, we had the pandemic breakout, and then all of the test centers started closing, and colleges were like, well, oh my gosh, how can we require the SAT or the ACT when students can't even go anywhere to take this exam? And so the vast majority of schools went into a bucket, I'll bring them all up here, which is called test optional. Now, when the schools went test optional, they were saying, hey, okay, we're just going to put more weight on your essays, your letters of recommendation, your activities, but we're not going to require the test score. And that made sense for that time. Now, since we are out of the pandemic, there are many schools that have chosen to be test optional. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But there are a lot of schools, particularly those who are more elite colleges, that move back to being test required. One of the easiest examples, or kind of best known examples here, is MIT. And so MIT went test optional during the pandemic. They accepted a bunch of students that thought would be a good fit, and they saw the lowest, or actually the highest dropout rate that they've ever had in their freshman class because they were accepting students who were not ready to perform at the level of rigor of MIT courses. And so they had to say, whoa, we cannot go test optional any longer. We have to switch back to being test required because we're accidentally setting up students to fail here by saying that they are accepted and ready and going to be a good fit for MIT when they are not prepared. And so a lot of other elite colleges also switched to being test required. And if you are a sophomore right now and you're looking at a particular school and you're like, oh, well, that's my dream school and they are test optional right now, it does not mean that they're going to be test optional next year or the year after. Every single year you have schools flipping, and the biggest flip is going from test optional to test required. I have not seen a school kind of flip the opposite way, really, since the thick of the pandemic here. Okay, so test required means that you must submit an ACT or an SAT score. No, you have no choice in the matter. You have to do it. Now, test blind means that even if you try to submit it or not, the schools are not going to look at it. They do not care. That's thinking of the University of California system. Test optional means, hey, if you decide that you want to send it in, we'll take it into consideration. But if you don't, that's okay too. So those kind of like the three different buckets that you can think about here. Now, it is good to know that there are actually very, very few schools that are test blind, very few. And even if I had said the names of some of those test blind schools here right now, you may have not even heard of those schools. So the vast majority of colleges, 96%, actually consider standardized test scores in admissions. So 92% are test optional, 4% are test blind, 4% are test required. Now, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to quote, I am a graduate student right now at University of Michigan. So I am going to quote what somebody had said in the admissions office at University of Michigan, is that if you decide to go test optional, I don't know actually if you had a 1300 or a 900. I don't know. I assume that you're not sending it in for a reason, and that I don't know what that reason is. I don't know how close you are. So team, I always am going to encourage you to, especially if you are a sophomore, you junior right now, where you have some time, that to work up to that score and that goal that's going to meet what the average or the median of the previous incoming freshman class is at that school. Now, the thing that's kind of tough is right now, if I was to look up what is, what is Yale's average ACT or SAT score, you're going to see a number that's actually pretty high. In fact, it's usually about 100 points higher than what the actual average is for the freshman class. But remember, it's only students who are submitting their score that they can use that from, and it's often students who are submitting it often have very high scores. And so sometimes it may feel like, oh my gosh, every school I look up has an average of a 1550. It does kind of feel like that sometimes, but again, that's just because those students who had the top scores are submitting their scores. But again, if you don't submit, that is really putting colleges in the spot where they don't know if you actually scored very, very low, or if they are, kind of taking a gamble on you, and if it makes sense to accept you, or am I going to accept a student who's not going to actually end up performing well at our school, like that situation that MIT had. Okay, so let's kind of talk about some reasons here to take the ACT or the SAT. Number one is if you do have that score that's within the range of the other scores, it's going to make your application stronger. There are many, many scholarships that require standardized test scores. And so a big issue I see with students is they say, oh, I applied test optional, but then, oh, I didn't get any of these merit scholarships. I don't know what's going on. Like, you have to have a test score in so many cases to be considered for that merit aid. And so just keep that in mind. That's not just about getting in, it's also about getting it paid for as much as possible. And then recruiting, taking a standardized test will get the attention of schools and then open up those options for you in a positive way. So let's do a comparison here of, sorry, missed this one, and placement as well. So if you get a certain score that is a strong score, let's say took a math score, I got a 700 in math, that can allow me at many schools to skip certain classes without needing to pay for them. And so I don't have to take math 110, math 115 at the school because I have a score that allows me to jump through those. Not only does that mean that I can graduate earlier, but it's less money, less loans, less scholarship dollars to hunt for because I don't have to pay for those particular classes. And then just so you know, AP classes can also do the same thing. So if you are taking, AP Calc and you're getting a 4 or a 5, sometimes a 3, depending on the school, but a 4 or a 5, that can also give you college credit and allow you to skip ahead. Okay, so let's kind of do this test comparison now. Now, let me tell you, if I was showing you this slide like a year ago, this would have looked very, very different. The SAT, about a year and a half ago now, underwent significant changes with becoming a digital adaptive test. And then the ACT, just this year, has gone through quite a few changes, almost to kind of match what the SAT is like, of being a shorter exam. So in terms of the length of the test, it's about equal. I wouldn't use that to determine which one you should take. Now, the ACT gives you a score that's based off of English, math, and reading. And surprise, surprise, so does the SAT. But it is worth noting that the ACT has a science section. It is optional, but it is scored separately. Team, if you are planning to be a STEM major and you're taking the ACT, it is a must to take the science test. That looks real suspicious. If you are like, oh, I want to be an engineer, you took the ACT and you didn't do the science section, well, why not? That's going to raise more questions. You don't want questions being raised like that. For the score range for the ACT, it's out of a 36. That's a perfect score. And then a 1600 for the SAT. And then for super scoring, let me just say this. I think you'll be surprised how many schools now utilize super scoring. And so I'll talk about this as we get towards the end. I'm a college advisor in my work here that I do with Kaplan. But one of the things that we're doing once we submit our applications is that we have students go to College Board and do score sends. You have to send in your official score to all the schools that you're applying to. And you'll be able to see as you do that which schools are doing super scoring and which ones just take your best overall score. And I would say 9 times out of 10, you're going to see schools that includes the SAT as well, that are taking the best of each test. What was your best math over here? What was your best science over here? And they are coming up with a super score. So that's good to know. And also, there's no penalty for wrong answers. Back when I took the SAT initially when I was in high school, there was a penalty. And so you would get like points deducted. And I feel like that kind of rumor has stuck around. That is definitely not something that is true any longer. Okay, another comparison here as well is that the ACT, you have the option of taking this on paper and pencil or digitally. SAT now is digital only, unless you receive a certain accommodation from having an IEP that allows you to take it on paper. The calculator you are able to use for all questions, which is great. And then digitally it is built in. It's using the Desmos calculator. The essay is optional. The SAT has no essay unless you take it during school day testing, in which case you will take it with the essay. It is not an adaptive test for the ACT. So it's not like you're done taking the English section, you move on to reading or to math and it's considering how you just did. That is not the case. But for SAT, it is. However you do in the first module for math is going to determine what second module you receive, and you need to get to the harder one in order to get those top scores. That is not the case for ACT. Now, this is kind of a wild thing, but I'll put it out there, is that ACT, you can take it 12 times. SAT, you can take it unlimited amount of times. I'm trying to think. I think the most I know of somebody taking it was 6, but in theory, you could just take it forever and ever and ever. Okay, so you can. I'm not going to read through all of this, but you can kind of do that comparison here to see. But I think it is, so this is the ACT as an example. And then this one is the SAT. So what I highly recommend you do is take a practice, not the official, but take a practice of an SAT, a free practice for the ACT. And then I know those scorings aren't the same, but you can look at your percentile. And for instance, let's say you take the ACT and you find out your overall percentile is in the 75th. You take the ACT and you see it's in the 95th. Well, then you are somebody who should be taking the SAT, leave the ACT behind. But sometimes you'll be surprised. You really just need to compare your percentile ranks. There are concordance tables as well that will show you like a 24, the ACT means this on the SAT. But, comparing percentiles does the same thing as well. Team, remember, if we have any questions as we're going through this, you do not need to wait until the very end. You most certainly can ask questions in the Q&A about anything. Even if you want to share your particular score and you want to ask about it, you can write that in the Q&A. The Q&A is totally anonymous is not the right word because we can see who's saying it, but nobody else in this class will see what you're saying other than the teachers. Okay, so let's go ahead now. Let's talk about coming up with a plan to get a higher score. So whatever score that you see coming back, or maybe you already received your score back from the PSAT, you can do something about it, especially if you're 10th grade, especially if you're 11th grade. You do have time. So there are score raising strategies for every single section of the test. This test does not care if you do the questions in a way that would get you full credit in math class. Right, let me show all my steps and make it all pretty and nobody cares, right? Like there are ways to cut corners to be able to get the answer and do it as quickly as possible because that matters just as much as content knowledge and also being able to do efficiently so you can get the highest score possible. So there are score raising strategies for every single section of the test, as well as time management and pacing strategies. If I gave you 3 hours to do the math section, of course you would do better. But you don't have that. You have a short amount of time. And so what does it look like to work on pacing, to work on hopping around and be strategic about which questions you're doing? That is all incredibly important here for getting the top score. Another thing as well is you're going to want to do focused practice on realistic test questions so you can study smarter, not harder. The worst thing I see students doing is they're thinking, oh, well, I want to go, I need to bring up my reading score on the ACT. So let me just practice all these reading passages. Well, hold on. Maybe it's just the science passage that you're doing boo-boo on. Maybe it's just the prose fiction passage. So you want to make sure you can pinpoint exactly what is holding you back from that score so that you can be smart with spending your time practicing the things that you need to and kind of leaving behind or just kind of, reviewing every now and then the things that are already your strengths. Now, when it comes to prep, we have a bunch of different options that you can utilize. So I'll briefly just kind of make sure that you're aware of all of these options here. There is on demand. If you are somebody who's just like, you know what, I just kind of need to, maybe it's going to be Tuesday morning, and maybe it's going to be Saturday night, maybe it's going to be, that's fine. Then you can be able to work at your own speed and watch the pre-recorded videos that we do for classes. They're the exact same thing that we do for class, it's just not live. So you can watch that at your own pace. There's also a live session. I am one of actually the off-camera teachers too. All of us are on-camera teachers for the ACT and the SAT classes, in which you would come to a Zoom session just like you're here right now, and we'd be walking through. You can ask questions, have polls that we go through our classes. You're also able to sign up for the very first class, just kind of sitting in on that one just to see if that's a good fit for you. There is private tutoring if you're just like, hey, I don't need what the whole class needs. I just need to focus on X, Y, and Z, or I need somebody to help me figure out what I need to focus on and do that thing with me. Then there's private tutoring. And then there's also unlimited prep. If you're like, you know what? I want to take both exams. I also have some AP tests I'm trying to prep for. That is awesome because you are able to take as many different classes as you want to help prep you all the way up through your December of your senior year. So what I showed you here is PSAT prep. And then for ACT prep, it is exactly the same offerings that you see here, with that self-pay still being an available option. And then SAT prep here as well. Again, good to know that there are all these different ways for you to be able to prep, whichever way makes sense. And you don't have to figure it out alone. If you want to ask a question and say, I don't know if it's this one that's right for me, or if it's this one that's right for me, you can ask in the Q&A, and we're happy to help you think about that. Okay, so now let's talk about taking the official ACT or SAT. When you're working with Kaplan, you're going to get a higher ACT or SAT score, literally guaranteed, or your money back. So I think it's important to know just how much we believe in this product. Team, I will just say that when I was a high school student, this is how I prepped. And I was a National Merit Scholar. And this is what I used, is I used Kaplan. And as soon as I made it through college, that was the first thing I wanted to do. Literally the first job I said I wanted to have is I want to be able to work for Kaplan, because that is what I used to prep to pay for my college experience. I did not have to take out any student loans as an undergrad. And that was because that I had prepped and got that score. And it took me a little while. It took me like 4 months of prepping to really get the score I wanted and taking the tests over and over here, but I got to that score, and that's something that you are able to get to as well. Now, it's important here to kind of add some stats here. So 9 out of 10 Kaplan students get into one or more of their top college choices. And then the average you can see here is about 4 points growth when we're talking about the ACT specifically. Now, if you want to see what these classes are like, you can absolutely join a free trial. We have a free trial for the ACT or the SAT. You can look through all the options of classes that are starting and say, I want to attend the first one of that ACT class, the first session of that, ACT or SAT class. You can join those. We are all happy when we have students there to get a feel or just kind of learn a little bit as they're there. The classes are excellent, and you'll be able to join one of them for free just to get a feel if that's a right fit for you. Okay, another thing to note, and I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, is that we have Kaplan College Advisors. I am one of them. And so what that program looks like is that we have students who are just so overwhelmed by the fact that they heard something on TikTok and something from a parent, and something from students from the previous graduating class of their high school of what it's going to take to be able to get into college. Team, we take whatever it is that you want for yourself, and we create a timeline that says, okay, then here's what we're going to do. If I'm working with you and you are a junior, we're going to work on your college essays. We're going to create a balanced list. We're going to get you in shape to have in the best SAT or the ACT score, and make sure that you were at a place that in July 1st, when those college applications open, you were hopping on them and getting ready to meet all the early action or early decision deadlines, and making sure that you have college applications that are going to put you in that place to be accepted. Or I have a student right now. Sometimes we have students who come in at the 9th grade level, and they're just like, I have a student that I'm working with who, like, their goal is to get to every single Ivy. That's kind of a wild goal, but I'm like, okay, well then let's come up with what that plan is going to look like. If we're in 9th grade, we can work to come up with something that looks like that. We also have many students who are just saying, hey, I really want to be able to get into, this, my state's university, or, I went to Michigan State University for undergrad. That's the kind of school I want to go to. I just kind of need some help to get myself organized and to make this work. No matter where you are on the spectrum here of where it is you're deciding for college, we are here to be able to assist to get you in the best place possible so you can get those applications in, be very, very proud, and be a student like our students who at the end can say, I got into one of my top choice colleges. We also have another tool that I want to share. This is something I often use with students here, is we have something called Cap Advisor Premium. So many students are used to, and there's nothing bad about this, but College Board has a tool that is called Big Future. And you're able to search through all of your college options and kind of see and do a comparison. It's just a great search tool. This is that times like 100. So you can put in all of your information. It will remember it, keep track of it. You can then put in your essays and get some feedback there. And it really is a personalized breakdown for you to be able to see what are the schools I actually have the highest chance of getting into? What is my chance of being accepted into these schools? What can I do to improve my chances of being accepted into these schools? And it really kind of gives you some goals to do based off of where you currently stand and the schools that you're looking at, as well as suggesting other schools along the way. And so, Cap Advisor Premium, awesome. Every single time that I'm working with a college advising student, that's like the first place we go is let's bring that tool up. Let's go ahead and start to build a balanced list if we don't have that list already. All right, my dears, I wish you the very best of luck here with your prep. Please come visit us at captest.com/college/prep, or you can always call us at 1-800-CAPTEST. Team, we are going to stick around for any questions that you may have. You could ask them in the chat. You could ask them in the Q&A. Of course, again, you can reach out to these options here through that phone number as well as that website. But we're here live now to answer those questions that you have. So please let us know. Thank you so, so much for attending. And we're going to hang around and see any questions that you may have. Thank you, everyone. No matter what your questions are, we're happy to answer that for you all. Even if it's something about the essays, about the test, about letters of recommendation, about restrictive early action. I'm just going to keep naming words that maybe you have a question about. If you don't, that's fine too. Thank you. I just saw thank you in the chat. Thank you. Okay, I'm the parent of an 8th grader. Can you recap what official tests are offered over the course of high school? I believe you mentioned taking the PSAT as a 9th or 10th grader. Yes, okay. So let me just go back to that. Here we go. Okay, so if you're a parent of an 8th grader, there's the PSAT 8-9. And so that is a form of exam that they are able to take. It's actually the same test you take as an 8th grader and as a 9th grader. It's the exact same test. But if you have access to take those, I would take both years. I would take it as an 8th grader, take it as a 9th grader. You can, by the way, take the full-blown SAT as an 8th grader as well. Many times students do that. But sometimes it can end up being discouraging if they're taking the full-blown SAT, because the SAT is testing you on what you would have learned in 9th grade, 10th grade, and first semester of 11th grade. And so sometimes it can almost be discouraging if a student takes an SAT and say, oh my gosh, my score is so low. Well, yeah, my dear, that's because you haven't taken those courses yet. So that's why they specifically have like these kind of like early versions of the exams that are geared towards what they would have known at that point. So a PSAT 8-9 would be excellent to take. And then there's also, if your school offers it, there is a pre-ACT secure that you can take as an 8th grader or as a 9th grader. And then when you go into 10th grade, it's called the PSAT 10. Also in 10th grade, you can take the PSAT NMSQT in the fall. That's the National Merit Qualifying Test, but it doesn't count for any scholarships, just kind of see how you're doing. And then 11th grade, that's when you can take any of these, all up for grabs. But I highly recommend figuring out if it is the ACT or the SAT you want to go with. So taking a practice test and just kind of seeing which one you do better on. But yes, you absolutely can and should take the PSAT 8-9 if you're an 8th or 9th grader. Good question. Any other questions, team? It can be about college admissions. It can be about test scores. You're welcome. You're very welcome. Just going to hang around for a couple more minutes in case you're typing up a question. Again, you can put it in the chat or the Q&A. Okay, team. Well, I am going to go off camera. If you are still typing in a question, we're absolutely going to get that answered for you. But thank you again so much for attending, and I hope to see you. I hope to see you in a future class that I have or that we have, or even as one of my advising students. Have a good night, everybody.